All right, we are back with another episode of the Sunshine State Happy Hour powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, even though we're not talking about beer today, which is perfectly fine and quite just as delicious as anything. Anyways, this is Dave, your host and author. Hopefully you are following us. Hopefully you are getting ready to vote for people that are pro-Florida craft beer, and hopefully we can get some good changes passed through in the next legislative session in Tallahassee. Steve, did you vote yet?
I have not.
You have not voted. You waiting for early voting?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, it's the same thing. Well, that opens on Monday, everybody. So, are you a big baseball fan?
I am.
You are. So you've been watching what the Tampa Bay Rays have been doing right now, right?
I'm a Pirates fan. Who are the Rays?
I'm just going to kick you off right now. I'm just going to do that. So obviously, hopefully we can get a second major national championship to the Tampa Bay area this month, maybe next month. But we were talking about the other side of the Bay, specifically St. Pete, which is possibly one of my favorite cities in Florida. And it's home to a lot of really good stuff, including today's guest, Mother Kombucha, which is one of the most amazing kombucha. What is a place that produces kombucha called? Because obviously a wine-making place is a winery, and then you've got a distillery and a brewery. A kombuchery?
We still call it a brewery since it's fermentation and you brew the teas. So that's what we've always. But we just call our place the mothership. So
this is Tonya Donati, co-founder and managing partner of Mother Kombucha. Tonya,
I'm losing you on the audio, Dave.
Thank you so much for coming to the show.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh no,
sorry.
I just saw you locked up.
Yeah.
No.
You'll be okay there.
No, it's trust me, it's not you, it's me. And what's funny is that since we're talking about baseball, and this is kind of partially the reason why I purchased it, the other was just how delicious it was. I am drinking the Trop.
Yes.
Which is it right to assume that there's more than just a passing resemblance to Tropicana Field?
It is. It was a nod. When we first started out and we were making just tiny, 2 keg at a time batches in a little kitchen, we had a bunch of names that were after various landmarks around town. There's a place in South St. Pete called Thrill Hill. So we had one called Thrill Hill, and we had a variety of one, but the Trop stuck. So
nice.
Yeah.
So kombucha, obviously, it's really taking the U.S. by storm. You can find it all over the place, and there's a lot of kombucha breweries that are around, obviously not just the state of Florida, but the U.S. in general. Kind of, I guess, take us through what is kombucha and why is it becoming so popular?
So kombucha is a tea that is fermented with a culture. It's a culture that has both bacteria and yeast in it. It eats a lot of the sugar, turns the yeast, just like in beer, produces some alcohol, and then the bacteria consume the alcohol and make acids. It's high in B vitamins. One bottle of our kombucha has I think 13,000 times your RDA of B12. So super high in B vitamins, really low in sugar. We specifically brew ours to keep the sugar below between 25 and 35 calories per 12-ounce bottle. So it's a great alternative to soda. It's also, when you want something kind of with that fermented, bubbly taste, it's a great stand-in. You can't drink beer. Most people can't drink beer at 9 a.m., so it's also a kind of a nice, healthy fermented beverage when you want that fermented taste or when you're cutting back on the booze. It's a great substitute as well.
And I'll tell you, it's interesting. It's got sort of a peppiness, which I like, but I guess my thing is, because I don't really drink tea, but it doesn't really taste like tea. It's got sort of an almost vinegary-ish quality, almost if you diluted it and maybe carbonated it, and then obviously you've got a bunch of great flavors to it. interesting how complex it is.
Yeah, and I think that that's what can be sometimes puts people off the first time they taste it. But the more they have it, it's one of those things where they, Hannah that runs our trade organization, Kombucha Brewers International, she used to say, like, first sip, you don't know what to make of it. Second sip, you're kind of like, maybe. And then, you get 3, 4, 5 sips in, or you may want to say 3 or 4 times that you try it. And then you realize that there's something there. And it is, there's a lot going on in the flavor. It's really rich from the fermentation.
And then obviously with the flavors, one of the reasons why I chose to try, because it's pineapple and coconut. It's basically a kombucha pina colada, obviously. Right. How do you get a lot of the flavors in? Do you use a lot of natural flavors? Do you try to use a lot of local ingredients when you are flavoring the kombuchas?
So one of our founders, Josh Rumschlag, is actually he studies herbal medicine, specifically traditional Chinese medicine, but also Western medicine. And so from the very beginning, we've always added adaptogenic herbs into our recipes, which basically are just plants that help you adapt to stress and just naturally enhance a sense of well-being. So we've always put a variety of herbs, and we don't use fruit juices. So we use a combination of fresh berries, herbs and adaptogens, the flavors that naturally occur in the fermentation. And then we do use some organic flavorings to keep our sugar low rather than using a fruit juice.
Gotcha. And I know one of the varieties that you have that I still have in my beer cooler, I need to open that pretty soon. You actually dry hopped it.
We do. That's actually our best seller, the hopped passion fruit. It's my favorite, and I think it's just the flavor is very rich. Yeah.
What kind of hops did you use in it?
We use, depends on what we can get organically, but based on the crop availability, we've used Cascade hops mostly in the past, and Amarillo.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. So you're brewing the tea, you're brewing the kombucha in St. Pete. How difficult was it to sort of sell originally? Was St. Pete, was the region, Pinellas County, sort of open and willing and trusting and hungry, for lack of a better term, for something like this? Had there already been kombucha in the community already, or did you really have to start from scratch and sort of educate people there what they had?
Yes, it was a combination of, there were people that were very hungry for it. So we were super fortunate. We started in 2014, and we started out very small. We were working out of a tiny commissary kitchen that was a catering kitchen for a restaurant in St. Pete that had a little extra space that they just let us rent out, basically a corner. And we started by presenting it to the Saturday morning market here in St. Pete, which is a kind of a nationally known farmers market. On a good weekend, they supposedly get 10,000 visitors during the high season. And so most people end up on the list to get in there for years before they can get in as a vendor. But it just so happens that they were looking for a kombucha and nobody had presented a local kombucha to them. And so we got right in. As soon as we had product, they escorted us in. And so that was our chance to kind of test the market and see, did people in St. Pete have an interest? Were we on the right track with our recipe formulations and our flavors? When we started out, the kombuchas that were on the market were all coming from the West Coast. Still, most of the national brands are from the West Coast. So pretty big footprint. And definitely those earlier brands, a different flavor profile. So it took a lot of convincing at first. People either at that time didn't know what kombucha was, or they had it, but it had been like their aunt made it on their kitchen counter and kind of made them try it, and they had a bad taste for it. So there was some educating and re-educating going on that we sort of had to work with. But for the most part, we found that the local businesses that knew what kombucha were really excited. But we started out as draft only. And so we were competing for beer taps most places. So you know what that's like. You know what the beer world is like, and what the tap houses and all the places. So it was definitely a hard sell to get those taps. But what the places found, if they had 10 taps or 20 taps and they tried one, that they were actually seeing, some pretty solid movement. So, and then we got started right when St. Pete was just explosively growing with juice bars and fast casual restaurants, and and more. All the craft beer places were only open about a year before we got started. Green Bench and all those guys were super helpful, not only carrying our product but also just incredibly supportive. And we started out making it like home brewing, but just bigger batches, so we knew nothing about the process. The process of like what commercial production is like. And so we had tons of support from our local craft beer scene too. So we kind of helped each other out, I think, in the growing process.
Awesome. You said that a lot of the kombuchas that had been in St. Pete up until that time had come over from the West Coast. And it brings to the question, does kombucha travel well? Because it seems to me that every kombucha that I've ever seen, nothing is ever shelf stable. It's always in the cooler, and it's always got to stay cold as much as humanly possible. Is that a factor for wanting a kombucha that's made a little bit closer to home when you actually go out and try to find some?
It's interesting that kombucha is different from a lot of other beverages. Like, I don't think most people care. To me, it's very similar to craft beer in that people naturally, I feel like it's almost subconscious in some ways that because it's alive, you just know that if it comes from close by, it's probably better, or there's just a drive to support the local in that way. But yeah, it's cold chain. It has to stay refrigerated. If not, it's pasteurized and has shelf probiotics put back in it instead. So yeah, it's as a business, it's challenging because you're trucking it all the way across the country. So and then from what is the lifespan of the product and how long ago was it made and what did it do on the trip from California to Florida, and what was the carbon footprint of it. There's a lot of things to think about, when you're consuming something that's alive. And consumers of kombucha are like beer consumers, they're thinking about those things.
So obviously you'd mentioned that it is alive, and one of the things that I have seen multiple times is the mother, the actual, I guess the thing that makes kombucha what it is. What is that, and how do you keep it alive? Because people are probably thinking of some sort of weird scientific laboratory with the beakers and the little glass tubes that drop down, leading into some sort of monster from a 50s B movie. But it I guess it's kind of similar to that, at least in texture.
Yeah, Halloween is coming up. It definitely has a little bit of a creep factor to it for people that aren't familiar, and it's kept a lot of people from home brewing, and it's definitely part of the lore of kombucha. But what it is, it's a byproduct of the bacteria, and they call it a SCOBY, which is symbiotic colony of bacteria and yeast. But really, it is a byproduct of the bacteria. And so the SCOBY itself is not what makes the kombucha. The SCOBY is a production of the kombucha. It forms a lid, basically a seal over the top of the product. And the theory is that it helps with that transition from anaerobic to aerobic to anaerobic fermentation, and it keeps out, if this were happening in the wild and not where you're brewing it at home or commercially, but kind of survival wise, it forms kind of like a covering and a lid that protects the culture that's inside. But really what is the thing that makes kombucha is the liquid, and it's not the thing that forms across the top is really a byproduct. It's not necessary for the making of it. It's just a part of the process.
Gotcha.
So,
interesting.
Yeah.
So, but I'm assuming you can get some pretty big scobies, and if we were to look at your facility, you've got some.
We've had some monsters. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Nice. That's amazing. So we've got this amazing drink, and obviously you are now found throughout the state, if I'm correct.
We are. We're in Whole Foods across Florida, Publix across Florida, about 100 Winn-Dixie and Bi-Lo stores. We also, our reach goes up to South Carolina and over to Louisiana through those accounts. Publix takes us up into to Georgia, South Carolina. And then we also have our regional distributors that take us to the independent and on-premise accounts like the restaurants and bars and gas stations and various places like that. So, but we are very Florida focused. That's the vast majority of our customer base.
And what I find interesting, and I was telling Steve this as we were chatting about this episode beforehand, is that you would think that it would be in the drink section or maybe even in the cold beer section, but for the Mother Kombucha, which is still currently 2 bottles for $5 at public stores in Florida today only.
It ends today.
You actually find it in the produce section.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of an interesting, I guess, do you find that a little surprising, or is that knowing the product and knowing what it does and how it is that not too terribly surprising to you?
I think that, so some stores put it under dairy. So it would be in the cold case with more, not necessarily next to the milk, but it's kind of classified as a dairy item and not a produce item. But yeah, it is basically what refrigeration does it make the most sense in, I guess, as the grocery store was thinking about it. So they chose, I think, because of the healthful nature of it, to put it with the smoothies and juices and, blended in that way. So,
and obviously it's going to have a friend coming up pretty soon as I pour into my glass a can of what I know Steve is drinking and what I know you is drinking, which is your new product.
Right.
Kombucha, which, yep, there we go. Nice and crystal clear. Go ahead and introduce us to this incredibly wonderful drink that my wife has stolen almost all of from me.
So yes, Mother did have a baby, and we're very proud of our latest addition. What we found, because of doing the farmers markets and the events, and our team does a lot of the demos and the merchandising, and we still try, even the owners and everybody on our team has really made it a point to always stay out there and be connected with our end consumer. And what we found throughout the years is that there's some things that are keeping some people from experiencing the benefits of kombucha. And for some, it might be that the sugar, even at just, the low sugar levels that we have, it's just more sugar than they want in their diet. Some are concerned, even though we're kombucha that's sold in the grocery store on those aisles is non-alcoholic. There's some trace alcohol. So that's a barrier and a concern for a variety of people. And then for some people, it's the taste. Like they just can't get past the fermented flavor. And so we wanted to create a beverage that kind of reached out beyond the traditional kombucha crowd and could be appealing to even a wider audience. And so we started experimenting. It's about 2.5 years of R&D behind the product. And we also wanted something that was shelf stable for the very reasons that you were talking about. From a business perspective, it's very difficult to maintain your quality of product and still try to get outside of a certain area. It's very, very difficult with the cold chain model. So we did want to have a shelf stable product. And that's where this came about, is we basically created a drink that has a lot of the naturally occurring benefits of kombucha. So it's rich in the organic acids. and it is extremely rich in B vitamins. Still has 2200% of your RDA of B12, and it also has 45% RDA of folate. So you get the healthy acids and the naturally occurring vitamins. So this is all made by the kombucha. It is not lab grown, so none of the nutrients are supplemented or added in. It's just solely from the kombucha. So we were just looking for another way to take the kind of what we think is the magical, healthy, healing properties of kombucha and get it out to more people. So we're pretty excited about it. Also comes in at a lower price point. We know that kombucha is definitely a luxury item. It's expensive to make, and it's the cold chain and the transportation, the glass bottles adds up to a very expensive product. So this also has a price point that makes it much more accessible to a wider audience.
And Steve, how are you enjoying yours? I've had the grapefruit before. It's fantastic.
It's really good. It's super easy to drink. I can see this competing with like the LaCroix waters and stuff like that.
Right.
It's not quite as sparkling as that, if that makes sense, but it has just enough in there where you feel it.
So this product will be
actually, what I find amazing about this, because my wife is a big seltzer fan, and
Uh-oh.
Well, we lost him.
His internet is spotty when he's in his closet. It's a great picture, though.
Right.
So this I can see is definitely a daily summer drink, like just easy to drink all day long. It's perfect.
My internet connection is just not having it today.
I lost you there for a minute. Well, what I wanted, it's basically, this is more of a made to be a enhanced sparkling water using kombucha's benefits to enhance your water. And so we don't see it as a direct competitor to kombucha or replacement of kombucha, but really more as, hey, you want something that you can chug, you can take it out when it's hot, you can like truly get the hydration and knock it back, that kind of crushability of a water. So we really see it as and it will be on the water aisle. So it'll be launching in 300 Publix at the first week in November, and it's merchandised on the water aisle. So,
okay. So yeah, that was one question that I know Steve and I had is where is it going to be? Because you take a look at the bottles, these are in the produce section, but when these come out in 6-packs, obviously there's just not enough space there. So that does make a lot of sense. Yep. In terms of the actual packaging, I guess it's interesting that the kombucha I've only ever seen in glass bottles or the big plastic bottles, but with the kombucha, you in the can. Is there any chance that this is going to start moving into this, or is this not really even possible to have? I guess what was sort of the decision, the ideas behind that? Starting kombucha and then moving forward.
So switching our product line to cans is a big step, and it's something that we've considered doing. And I think what we'd really like to do is start doing some seasonals in cans and experimenting with that. Changing overall your packaging for a company growing the way that we are in our size is a big challenge if we were to move our kombucha over to cans from a production standpoint. But it just made the most sense for water. And with the, you want that portability, you really want that. Topo Chico's in glass, but you don't see a lot of water in glass anymore,
No, you're right. And then once this finally, I guess, started getting tested, how was that process and kind of how was it received? Obviously, I can tell you what we think, and my wife absolutely loves it as well as, us. But what was the initial reaction once you finally started kind of, excuse the pun, testing the waters?
Yeah. It's been amazing. I mean, people have just been going crazy over it. We've just started selling it on our website over the summer. selling it at some independent groceries and some kind of grab and go fast casual places around town. And people have just been going nuts for it. It's interesting because people say, I don't like sparkling water, but I like this. I don't like kombucha, but I like this. And so I found that I expected people to say, I don't like kombucha, but I like this. But I've been really shocked to find out how many people have said, well, I don't really like sparkling water, but this just has just enough something in it to be satisfying in a way that I'm the same way. I'm not a big sparkling water drinker. I drink regular water most of the time. Yeah. And yet I can just sit here and crush these back. And so it's kind of hard to explain, but it's been an interesting phenomenon. That was not expected when we developed the product, really. That was just a nice surprise.
I'm very happy to hear that because that's exactly how I feel. I have no problem with the kombucha. Kombucha is fine for me, and especially the ones that you release are actually delicious, or absolutely delicious. But when it comes to a regular seltzer, I just can't do it. Yeah, but this, you're completely right. It's got enough flavoring to where it's actually kind of an enjoyable beverage and not just sparkling water with maybe the thought of some sort of flavoring inside there somewhere.
Right. And like Steve said, we didn't want to overdo it with the carbonation so that it's, just like hard to get down and leaves you with indigestion when you're halfway through a can. So we tried to find kind of a nice in between where it's not still. It does give you some sparkle, but it's not overwhelming. That's what we're going for.
And perfect. So you said this is going to be showing up in some public stores at the beginning of November. Is it mainly in the Bay Area, or is it just smattering across the state?
It's across the state. So we'll have a store locator on our website that'll help people find it, but it'll be specifically targeted select stores throughout the state.
Gotcha. But if you still want some, you can go to motherkombucha.com and purchase some as well. Interesting. I almost hate to ask this question, but what's coming next? I mean, you mentioned the seasonal flavors. Are we to expect peppermint, ginger kombucha coming sometime soon?
We do
pumpkin.
We actually do a fall seasonal that we joke is our answer to pumpkin spice, and it's a chai yopon. So I don't know if you know what yopon is, but it's the only native form of caffeine that grows in the United States. It's grown in Florida and South Georgia primarily. It's a plant that has a lovely natural form of caffeine that's similar to mate, and it kind of gives you that nice, clean energy boost. And then we use some chai spices with it. It's really nice. Kind of the yopon, when it ferments, gets a little bit of a honey flavor. It's really nice. So that's going to be our fall seasonal we'll have out this year. And we actually do in around Christmas time for the markets, we do one that's called candy cane. That's peppermint vanilla, and people love it.
Oh, that sounds really good. I would actually try that. I would try that. That sounds phenomenal, to be honest with you. We'll have to keep checking the public stores to see if that comes down here. Steve, can you help me out on that?
Yeah, definitely.
So, and now one thing that I'm always curious about, because I did try to make my own kombucha. I think I failed miserably at this point, and I don't really want to get into the stories about it so much, but in something that you do sort of mention you've mentioned before, and you mentioned on the label, is that the process of making the kombucha produces alcohol. But this is not an alcoholic beverage. This is not like the hard seltzers that everybody is making. These are non-alcoholic. You don't have to do anything. How do you do that? How do you get rid of something that's that natural sort of byproduct?
Well, the yeast that are in kombucha are different than some of the yeasts that are the high alcohol producing yeast. So the culture itself does not want to be a super high alcohol producing. I don't know if you got a lot of alcohol when you made yours or if it just didn't taste good, but it's heavier on the acetic acid side, which is going to be, more like a vinegar. So I always say that it sounds gross, but kombucha sort of lives in this world between how vinegar's made and how beer is made. And so it's going to have a lower alcohol. And then you just, as we started to grow our business and test for alcohol, we started to learn new ways to modify the brewing process through steps and modify the amount of sugar. Various types of brewing containers affect the how much aeration it gets. There's a lot of different things you can do to work on and get it where you need it to be. It just takes time.
Well, awesome. And I know that you have a lot of fans across the state and in several other states. And you are made in St. Pete, but as of right now, you do not have a storefront or tap room. Is that correct?
We don't. We would love to, and COVID kind of got in the way. We had a plan for we have a upcoming plan to eventually have a tonic bar and kind of a sober bar, a tasting room, tap room, kind of sober bar where we also use some herbs and tonics and things like that, and also test new product lines. And I don't think it's going to happen in 2021, but you never know. You never know. It was supposed to happen. It was supposed to happen this winter, but that's not going to happen. But maybe next year.
Oh, that's a shame. Well, if that does come to fruition, or if you need any testing for that peppermint vanilla kombucha, that sounds amazing. Just let us know.
Well, we do sell out of our building. We have a Square site for people who are local that they can order and pick up, and we will have seasonals available there. So we fill growlers and sell by the case that way. So it's just motherkombucha.square.site. So
that's amazing. That's really cool. It's amazing how many brewers and people have kind of embraced that, especially as quarantine has raged on as just another great way to get the product out there. So that is
made
fantastic.
us all be creative, hasn't
it? Pretty much. Tanya Donati from Mother Kombucha, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've been looking forward to this one for a couple months now because the product's just been a part of Florida for as long as I've been writing the blog. So definitely thank you so much for coming on. For those of you that are sticking around for next week, we are going to be bringing on Mark Denote, who literally wrote the book on Florida beer. I think I have it somewhere here. Do I have it? Here's one of them. So yes, he's on. Yay. And he actually just released a new website and podcast called Beer Wise. It's not as good as the Florida Beer podcast. I will definitely let you know. Unless he's here, at which time I will say it's the greatest podcast in existence.
Correct.
I don't know. But he is going to be coming on the show to talk about this new project that he just launched. In the meantime, if you need any information, want to know what's coming on, obviously find us always at floridabeerblog.com and floridabeermedia.com. We are online on your social media channels with a Z at Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter, FL Beer Blog on Facebook, which you're on right now, unless you're watching us on our YouTube channel, at which time hopefully you will be able to go back out. And hopefully Publix will have another sale on Mother Kombucha. I think I need to run out one more time tonight and stock up a little bit because the trop is fantastic, and I know I need a couple bottles of this if the Rays do make it all the way.
That's right. We're going for the series.
Once November 1st hits, and then once November 1st hits, this will be a permanent part of our house. I'm just letting you know this right now. Tanya, thank you so much for coming on the show. We really do appreciate it. And for everybody else, thank you for listening, joining in, and drink Florida Craft. Cheers, everyone.
Thanks, Dave. Cheers.